Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, fellow citizens, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization, which supports financially through your donations this podcast, our website, our emails, our text messages, our donations to other conservative groups and organizations around the nation. Thank you to all of you who donate to make this possible. And if you can join them, if you have the wherewithal to help support our organization, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org and donate what you can. We would greatly appreciate it. We want to welcome all of you who are new to this podcast. We've been doing an advertising campaign on Rumble, and so we're getting some new people. And we obviously want to thank all of you who've been with us for, some of you, many of you, for 15 years, for coming back week after week to get what? To get a weekly summary of the news that happens this week, and then our opinion about how that affects your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And then what can we do? What can we as citizens do to protect and defend our personal interests, to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity? Okay, so that's why you're here, and I think you'll enjoy today's podcast. It's a little less than we've had in the last several weeks, because in Trump world, man, it's just coming at you like a fire hose. But we've got a little bit fewer stories this week, and I'm glad for that. It's a nice break. So before I forget, I just want to remember to thank and say Happy Mother's Day to all of you who are watching this podcast, who have brought us our children and our grandchildren and helped to raise them and sustain our species and our way of life. And we, Mother's Day is a really big deal, should be the biggest deal, because what moms and grandmoms and do for all of us is just the most important thing ever. So happy Mother's Day to all of you. We love you so much, and I hope that you will get lots of love from your children and your spouses and your grandchildren and your great grandchildren, because you deserve it. This is a very special holiday this Sunday, and I hope everyone will be spending it with their moms if possible, or at least talking with them and sharing some fun memories about their childhood. So happy Mother's Day to all of you who brought us our children and our grandchildren. We can't thank you enough. We honor you. We honor you. So let's get on with the podcast. I've explained what this is about. So we're looking at news. We're trying to filter out the propaganda. We're trying to then take at least expose the propaganda, and then we're taking the news that's left and trying to put it in some sort of context. So I'm going to start with the news that they picked a new pope, and they did that really surprisingly fast. And then they surprised us all by picking an American-born cardinal to be the new Pope Leo XIV, which was a shock to everyone, because in 2,000 years, there's never been an American Pope. So yes, that's a big deal. Just being objective, it's a big deal. I think there's a lot to think about as to why this happened. I don't believe in accidents. I don't believe in coincidences. I think the fact that Donald Trump is remaking the world order, and that the Catholic Church is a big part of that, has something to do with why this Pope was chosen. We will see. We know some things about this Pope. And it was after less than 24 hours of seclusion, the Cardinals ended the 2025 Papal Conclave with this nomination of Cardinal Robert Prevost, who will be known as Pope Leo XIV, the first Pope ever from the United States. He was born Robert Francis Provost in Chicago, Illinois in 1955, the same year I was born. He is the first U.S. Pope of the Church's history and is also a citizen of Peru, where he worked for many years. He graduated from Villanova University in Pennsylvania with a degree in mathematics, then studied theology at Catholic Theology Union of College of Chicago, where he earned a Master's of Divinity. He is, they're looking at his voting records. He's voted Republican. He's had some social media posts that were, against President Trump and J.D. Vance, but he's also had some positions where he is not, he does not defend the gender theory, of, you can change your gender. He is not, he thinks that mass immigration is a problem. I don't know. I just know that we are living, I said this to a friend of mine last night. We were talking about what happened here in Ohio, and I'll talk for you, those of you, who are Ohio members. I'll talk about at the end of the podcast the fight that we had this week to get Vivek Ramaswamy endorsed to be the next Republican candidate for governor here in Ohio, which was a major lift. And I apologize to some of you. Our organization. So if you're new to this organization, let me just say, we started out as an Ohio organization. The We the People Convention was actually invented to put on a convention in Ohio for Tea Party activists. And we did that for 10 straight years. It was only in 2020, after the election was stolen, and we ran the ad that I held up a couple of weeks ago in our podcast that called for President Trump to, do temporary limited martial law to have the 2020 election redone, that we became a national organization. So about 30% of our members are from Ohio. And so this week I had to spend a tremendous amount of our effort and resources in that fight to get Vivek Ramaswamy, basically endorsed a year ahead of the primary, which is really unusual, to try to stop the Columbus cartel from rigging the election again. That story, I'll talk about that in more depth at the end of the podcast. But what I said to my friend is that we are living in both historic and biblical times. I'm convinced of that. I see it in my life all the time. This last thing about this fight for Vivek Ramaswamy is another example of how God is acting in this whole space. And I think this Pope being an American, while Trump is ascendant and remaking the world, I think there's something to that. It could be bad. It could be that the leftist church in Rome and the cardinals that Francis had put in wanted someone to check Trump, and maybe that's what this new pope is going to try to do, which I think they'll be unsuccessful. But maybe not. Maybe there's going to be an alignment, like as unusual as Trump and RFK Jr. Okay, maybe there'll be this alignment between Trump and the Catholic Church to end the globalism, to end communism across the globe, to do what John Paul did with Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in Poland. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see, because actions speak louder than words. I do know the Catholic Church, and again, full disclosure, those of you who watch this podcast know I was born and raised a Catholic in Erie, Pennsylvania. I was on the path to become a priest. I was an altar boy and a sacristan, and went to Catholic grade school and high school and college. Okay. And then, we had a big falling out, and I'm a non-practicing Catholic. But I do know a lot about the Catholic Church. And one of the things I know about the Catholic Church is it's about the money. Okay. There's a lot about the money. And one of the things that a friend of ours put out a graphic that showed, which countries had the most Catholics in the world. And what was interesting is that North and South America was like the dominant area. And then I was told that the most contributions to the Catholic Church come from the United States. So, don't think that wasn't a factor as well. But anyway, we'll stay on it. We'll let you know. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal that the new Pope is an American. We don't really understand how that's going to play out, but you do need to know that it will affect your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, because the Catholic Church is a big voting bloc. And if they oppose President Trump, then that could be an issue in the 2026 primaries or elections, general elections. And if they support him, that could be really big, not just here, but globally. We will see what happens. All right. Other than that news, the big news this week was that President Trump announced a major deal. President Trump hit a home run with his first major trade deal when he signed a breakthrough deal with the United Kingdom. Now, a lot of people were surprised that it was the United Kingdom. They thought it was going to be India or Japan or South Korea or someone like that. And, Trump again, really made a great deal. And I posted it. You can see that story at wethepeopleconvention.org, but let me just review it briefly. The breakthrough U.S.-UK trade deal announced Thursday by President Donald Trump is the first agreement to be unveiled since he slapped steep tariffs on allies and adversaries alike on April 2nd. Most experts were surprised that the first trade deal would be with such a major player like the UK. Expectations are that additional deals will now move more quickly since the baseline for terms has now been set. That's a very key point for you to understand. And this affects your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, because these trade negotiations are going to be critical to your personal wealth and prosperity. Okay? So this is a big deal for all of us. What did the deal do? It increased market access. The 10% baseline tariff imposed on most U.S. trading partners in early April remains in effect for most goods in this deal, with the largest reduction in trade barriers coming on items recently subject to new sector-specific tariffs of 25%. The new deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, Trump said during the Oval Office announcements, which was attended by Peter Mandelson, the British ambassador in the United States, and this Prime Minister of UK did call in to that meeting as well. The agreement is bringing, this is important, an additional $6 billion to the Treasury Department's coffers from new tariff revenue. The deal is sure to be closely scrutinized ahead of Trump's administrative self-imposed July deadline for talks with some of the nations facing a far higher rate of tariffs if no deal is struck. What was interesting to me, and you can read more at this story at wethepeopleconvention.org, just go to the article section. What was really interesting to me is they revealed what a great job that the UK trade team did in preparing to make an offer to the US. What they did is they looked at all the countries that they traded with, and they said, we do this and this and this and this with these other countries, but we would be better off if we bought those goods in the United States. So it wasn't like addition by subtraction. It was basically a shifting of trade from our enemies and from people who are not as friendly with us, and can I say China, okay, to the United States. So not only are we going to get a 10% tariff on British goods coming in the United States, $6 billion out the door, but U.S. companies are going to be able to sell lots more, like 10 billion more into the UK. That's what we're talking about, folks, because what does that do? That creates jobs in America, right? Manufacturing jobs, and it improves our income. It helps get rid of the deficit by having people making more and paying more taxes. This is the art of the deal. And so, they said, hey, this is going to help accelerate the deals going forward. So what happens next? This is a big deal. Exclusive. India offers a slash tariff gap by 2/3 in dash to seal trade pact with Trump. See, this is what's going on. Now, everybody wants to get in because the early adopters are going to get the best deals. So listen to what India is talking about. India offers to narrow the tariff gap with the U.S. to under 4%. India wants exemptions on all current potential trade tariff hikes, which I don't think they'll get, India is ready to give preferential access to 90% of U.S. goods. India wants U.S. to align it with allies on critical tech. So they want to join us with critical technology, which I think is AI mostly, and that's kind of interesting. Here's a story. India has offered to slash its tariff gap with the U.S. to less than 4% from nearly 13% now. So just think about that, okay? They're tariffing us at 13%. They're going to drop that to 4%. That's going to make every American good trying to be sold in India much cheaper, 10%, 9% cheaper. In exchange for an exemption for President Donald Trump's current and potential tariff hikes, two sources said, as both nations move fast to clinch a deal. This would mean that the average tariff differential between India and the U.S., calculated across all products without weighing for trade volume, would be reduced by 9 percentage points, in one of the most sweeping changes to bring down trade barriers in the world's fifth largest economy. The United States is India's largest trading partner, with the bilateral trade totaling $129 billion in 2024. That's a big deal. The trade balance is currently in favor of India, which runs a $45.7 billion surplus with the U.S., and that's the whole point. Donald Trump is saying, we're not going to accept that. You want access to our markets, you're going to have to pay a tariff, which is going to do what? Bring down our income tax, right? Help us not be a deficit spending country every year. That's the goal. So this is a big deal, okay? And so what happened next? Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. Today, this Saturday, May 10th, U.S. and China will hold icebreaker trade talks in Geneva. And we said this, we told you weeks ago when people were saying, oh, this is going to crush the United States. China's is going to be the winner here when all the globalists and the big, New York banks and stock people who have been making a fortune off of our loss of manufacturing jobs and offshoring. They're the ones who are all gloom and doom, but they're wrong. We showed you last week and the week before, China is in serious trouble. They're having riots. I saw a quote this week that I went, oh my, where Xi was encouraging China's youth to go into rural communities and help with farming. That means they have no damn jobs. They have no jobs. And I read quotes to you in a previous podcast about the workers in China who are rioting. It's a big deal. So China is coming to the table today. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chief Trade Negotiator Jamieson Greer will meet China's economic czar He Lifeng in Switzerland this weekend for talks that could be the first step towards resolving a trade war disrupting the global economy. News of the planned Geneva meeting, first announced by Washington late Tuesday, sent U.S. equity indexes futures higher. Stock markets in China and Hong Kong followed suit during Asia trading on Wednesday. My sense is that these talks will be about de-escalation, Bessent told Fox News after the announcement. We've got to de-escalate before we can move forward. So Trump is actually hinting that he may lower the 145% tariffs to like 80 or something to try to start the talks moving. My sense is the Chinese Commerce Ministry spokesman later confirmed that China had agreed to meet the U.S. envoys. On the basis of fully considering global expectations, China's interests, and the appeal of U.S. industry and consumers, China has decided to re-engage the U.S., the spokesman said, citing a proverb about actions speaking louder than words. This is the first meeting between senior Chinese and U.S. officials since U.S. Senator Steve Daines met Premier Qi Huang in Beijing in March. Okay? So while they denied this and they said, we're not talking to the Trump people, yeah, they are. And that's good for you and I. But remember, it's all about posturing, right? It's all about posturing. So Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin were meeting in Moscow on the anniversary of D-Day. Okay, they met to basically celebrate the fact that the United States really wasn't responsible for winning World War II. It was the Soviets, the communists. Okay, genocidal Chinese dictator Xi Jinping held an extended private meeting and press event alongside Russian strongman Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Thursday, in which he declared that China and Russia were ready to safeguard the global multilateral trading system, presumably from President Donald Trump. Xi is in Moscow this week to attend Russia's victory parade, in which it celebrates the end of World War II and pursues its goal of erasing America's critical role in defeating Nazi Germany. Russia's Victory Day festivities focus on praising the defunct Soviet Union and featured prominent guests from some of Russia's top Marxist allies, including China, Cuba, and Venezuela. Russia had previously referred to D-Day, when American troops stormed the beaches of Normandy and turned the tides in World War II, as not a game changer. That wasn't important, even though Stalin begged us to open up a front against Germany to save Russia, even though Russia could never have defeated the Germans without U.S. manufacturing, making all the tanks and airplanes and trucks and weapons they needed. Okay. But oh no, it wasn't America's victory. It wasn't America's victory. So, there they are, together, trying to, position themselves. But it's real simple. We're on the ascent. They're in trouble, big trouble. And it's all because of President Trump. And I'll just, take a second to say, President Trump declared a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. And Ukraine leader Vladimir Zelensky has announced a 30-day ceasefire shortly after President Trump called for a halt to hostilities and finalized a mineral rights deal with Kiev. Let's see. He called for the ceasefire on Thursday following a public appeal by President Donald Trump for an end of the war and the signing of the landmark UK minerals deal. The announcement came just 1 hour after Trump revealed he was speaking directly with Zelensky to facilitate a truce. Ukraine is ready for a ceasefire starting right now from this moment. A 30-day silence, as Zelensky said in a video he posted on social media Thursday, but it must be real. No missiles or drone strikes, no hundreds of assaults on the front. American help can help with this. The world needs America now, just as it did 80 years ago when we invaded, on D-Day. Okay? So now President Trump is ramping up the pressure. J.D. Vance spoke against Putin, that they're asking too much, that they, the Russians are being Russians. They're trying to get as much as they can, and we have to draw a line. And so what is President Trump doing? He's going to increase tariffs. He's going to increase restrictions on Russia. He's going to hurt them, okay, like he's hurting China. It's a game of force, not influence, okay? And nobody's better at it than President Trump. So those are all serious things, and they involve our military. So this week's announcement by the Supreme Court that they back Trump's ban on transgender troops is important to all of us. Okay, it's important to all of us. And whether they had backed it or not, President Trump needed to ignore them, but they decided to go along. The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday that Trump's transgender military ban can be enforced while legal challenges proceed, effectively barring trans service members for serving in the military. The 6-3 decision overturned the injunction issued by a U.S. District Court, which prevented the policy from taking place. In January, Trump signed an executive order entitled Prioritizing Military Excellence and Readiness, saying that transgender troops did not meet the standards required of the armed forces, and directed the Department of Defense to act a ban. Okay? And so President Trump said in an executive order, a man's assertion that he is a woman and his requirement that others honor this falsehood is not consistent with humility and selflessness required of military service members. Okay? Well, Pete Hegseth, said it even better. Listen to this video clip. It's very direct.
We are leaving wokeness and weakness behind. No more pronouns, no more climate change obsession, no more emergency vaccine mandates, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that shit.
Yeah, we are. We have to be. Transgenderism is a mental illness. It's called gender dysphoria. That's a fact. That's a medical fact. That's not my opinion. There's no room in our military, for God's sake, for mentally ill people, because it's serious business. And so we're very happy to see this develop. And Pete Hegseth just announced, that he's giving all the transgenders like a month or so to get out, okay, or be mustered out. So that's good news. In other important news, we were all fighting for this Ed Martin, who was really a supporter of the January 6th political prisoners and the rule of law in DC. And Senator Tom Tillis was not going to confirm him. And they wanted to get rid of him. Why? Because I think he was going to investigate them. All right. That's what the game is here. So Tillis would not move, even though many of you called him and there was all kinds of calls on social media. Here's his phone number. Call this clown. Okay. And hopefully he's going to be primaried and defeated. But President Trump didn't have time because they had delayed it so long that if we didn't pull Ed Martin, his nomination, this Judge Brosberg, who's been one of Trump's biggest, foes in the radical rogue, courts, would have got to name who the person was in DC. So Trump, being Trump, is going to play the game to win. And he did something that just shocked me, but it certainly shocked the left and should be a lot of fun. Trump appoints Fox News host Judge Jeanine Pirro as top prosecutor in DC to replace Martin's appointment. So this is a temporary position. President Trump says he will appoint Fox News host and former prosecutor Jeanine Pirro as interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. Trump announced the pick on a post on Truth Social. The selection comes as Trump told reporters in the Oval Office Thursday that Ed Martin, who is currently serving as DC's interim top prosecutor, would not be taking the position permanently after losing support among top Republicans in the Senate. Pirro has been a longtime ally of Trump, dating back to her time as a prominent prosecutor in New York. She was an early supporter of his in the 2016 campaign and publicly defended him during the Access Hollywood tape scandal. She was, very much involved with the, saying that the cheating happened in 2020. And actually, she was part of the reason for Dominion Voting Systems suing Fox, for slander and that lawsuit that Fox settled for almost $787 million, which I think should be overturned. I think we're going to find that Dominion did, have software that cheated in the election. But what's important is, again, Trump's not playing around. So now Pirro, who's going to be really active and really tough, and again, she's an interim, right? So they'll appoint somebody else to be, to go through the Senate confirmation, which again, as I said to you last week, we talked about how they're abusing advice and consent, how this one Democratic senator has held up 300 of the 4,000 Trump potential appointees that need to get approved. And that's an abuse of power. So I've talked to you from the beginning, back in January, about my friend who worked in Washington in Trump's first term, saying they need to appoint acting directors who will just bring the hammer, because the Senate confirmation thing is a joke. Okay? Well, that's what he's doing now. But so now they don't have Ed Martin, but they got Jeanine Pirro, who's a pretty tough cookie, who's going to come after them. And what does Trump do? He moves Ed Martin into the DOJ. Trump taps Martin for DOJ pardon attorney in a weaponization role. This is a 1-2 punch. President Trump plans to put Ed Martin, his first pick for U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C., who was rebuffed by the Senate, in a far-reaching role at the Justice Department. In a Thursday evening post on a social media site, Trump said Martin would serve as both the head of the new weaponization working group and as the U.S. pardon attorney for perch in the office of the Deputy Attorney General. Ed will make sure we finally investigate the weaponization of our government under the Biden regime and provide much-needed justice for its victims. Trump indicated Thursday he would pull Martin's nomination after Senator Tom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, said he would not vote to advance the attorney out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Trump then said on Thursday's Oval Office that he hoped to find a role in the Justice Department, and he did. The weaponization working group was established by Attorney General Pam Bondi and lays out clear objectives mandating review of special counsel Jack Smith's work and the pursuit of improper investigative tactics related to the January 6th, 2021 Capitol riot. Okay? So now Ed Martin's going to have tools and access to go wild on these people. As the pardon attorney, Marston would also be responsible for reviewing petitions of those hoping to have their sentences commuted or be pardoned by the president, a group that already included the January 6th political prisoners. So, okay, they do something to block us. We counter that and double down. Now we got two, Pirro and Martin, going after them. It's a beautiful thing. Trump did another thing this week, okay, that is really smart. And I was shocked. I mean, I think this is going to shock a lot of people on the left, particularly. Supreme Surgeon General nominee withdrawn after truth comes out. Trump announces new MAGA candidate. New MAGA candidate. Who's that? How about Casey Means? After several reports regarding resume inflation sunk an already unsteady nominee for Surgeon General, President Donald Trump announced Wednesday that he was replacing with a candidate aligned with the so-called MAGA movement. Dr. Casey Means, an advisor to Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and a proponent of his Make America Healthy Again initiative, will replace Dr. Janet Neshawait as Surgeon General nominee. Casey has impeccable MAGA credentials and will work closely with our wonderful Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., to ensure a successful implementation of our agenda in order to reverse the chronic disease epidemic and ensure great health in the future for all Americans, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Neshawait, who was a Fox News contributor, and man, people went nuts when Trump first named her to be the Surgeon General candidate, has already come under attack from conservatives for her support of certain aspects of transgender ideology. But the most important thing of all is that no matter what gender your child identifies as, accept them and love them for who they are, she said on Fox News in 2022. She also described the COVID-19 vaccine as a gift from God, something that put her at odds with many Trump administration health officials. Okay, so we got rid of this bad pick and replaced her with a MAGA pick. That, wow. And so here's the pattern, right? President Trump has made a conscious decision. He's not just putting people who support our causes, whether it is to deport the illegals or fix crime or end the wars or whatever it may be. He's not just picking people that align with our cause. He is picking the person the left would hate the most. Okay? RFK Jr., they did not want him. They did not want Tulsi Gabbard. They did not want Pete Hegseth. They don't want Casey Means. But Donald Trump, it's just, he's not being subtle. He's being very powerful because he wants to move the needle, not to just halt the lunacy of the left, but to roll it back to sanity, to common sense that we had in this country before Barack Hussein Obama and the lefties took over all our institutions. And that's what he's doing. It's awesome. It's unbelievable. And so what comes with that? This is great news. You've got Trump just trying to push on all the buttons. And we all heard about Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, who ran on that she was going to get Donald Trump. Her political campaign was, I will get Donald Trump. And she proceeded to create a fictitious charge against President Trump, right, in New York, to try to keep him from ever being president and to put him in prison for life. And now, she's under investigation by the FBI. New York Attorney General Letitia James is known primarily for one thing, her obsession to get Trump. As we've reported, she achieved some success in her crusade, somehow getting a biased New York judge to fine Trump and the Trump organization over $400 million and counting with interest for a preposterous civil real estate case where there were no victims and no losses. Turnabout can be brutal, though, and now the Federal Bureau of Investigation has opened a federal criminal investigation into Ms. James for, you guessed it, real estate fraud. What she accused Donald Trump of doing, she's now going to be investigated for. A Hollywood screenwriter couldn't have dreamt this up. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office in Albany has opened a formal criminal investigation examining the real estate and mortgage transactions of New York Attorney General Letitia James, according to law enforcement sources briefed on the matter. It's unclear why the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi steered a referral to New York's Northern District, though James is a statewide elected official with offices in Albany. The charges against Letitia James is that she falsified records by listing her father as her husband on a 1983 loan, misrepresented her Brooklyn property as 4 units when it's actually 5 to secure a 2.7% HAMP loan in 2011, and claimed a Virginia home as her primary residency in 2023, potentially violating New York residency law. The DOJ is investigating, with possible wire fraud charges looming as well. That's what we want to see. We want to attack the people who broke our laws. We want to attack the people, not out of revenge. See, the left is like, oh, Trump is on a revenge. He's going after all the people who went after him. But he's not going after them with the phony baloney lawsuits that they created. Notice that he isn't, Trump's DOJ isn't going after Letitia James for some phony, charge. Matter of fact, the DOJ didn't even develop this case. A private investigator is the one who brought out all the documents to prove that she did this, and it's legit. Okay? There's a difference, folks. We are not abusing the law. We are enforcing the law. Equal justice under the law is what the left is complaining about, because Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and James Comey and all the rest of them have been above the law. That's over. That's the proof of it. But now I know that many of you are frustrated, okay? And, and with good reason. There's not enough people being charged, right? There's so much evidence. And so this week, that kind of exploded with an interview that Laura Trump did with Elon Musk on her show at 9 o'clock on Saturdays. Pretty good show, by the way, because obviously Laura Trump has access to anybody she wants. So that was an interesting interview. And so this story came out, where the hell is Pam Bondi? Elon Musk discovers 100,000 active federal employees illegally getting unemployment benefits. Folks, you can't make this up. You can't make this up. Elon Musk, President Donald Trump's leader of the Department of Government Efficiency, has made a startling discovery, saying there are more than 100,000 active federal employees illegally receiving unemployment benefits. So get what this means. They're getting their pay from the federal government, and they've also filed for unemployment benefits and are getting unemployment checks. Not a couple. 100,000 out of the 2 million federal employees are doing this. The DOJ chief revealed the stunning figure Saturday to Laura Trump. We've actually found there's a lot of people who are federal government employees who are active employees who nonetheless have applied for and received unemployment insurance. And Laura Trump said, while they are federal employees, and Musk said yes. And this appears to be at least 100,000 people. One online journalist, Nick Sorter, reacted with outrage. That's called fraud. We need arrests. And this said, and Musk said, this is insanely easy to prove. The DOJ just needs to make a movie at it. These arrests are layups. It's a layup. Here's your check for the Treasury Department or from agriculture where you work. Here's your check, and here's your unemployment check, and you've been cashing them. That's called fraud. Don't just fire them. Charge them. Take everything they got. Okay? And he said, and then Musk said, I'm really, really hoping I'm proven wrong, but I'm starting to lose hope that the DOJ is ever going to make any significant arrests for corruption, voter fraud, etc. That's really scary. That's really scary. So I don't know what the holdup is. I talked to you last week about someone who said, hey, part of the problem is if we charge these people, what courts are we going to bring it in? Because all the activist judges don't follow the law. But I think in this case, it's just as simple. It's a layup. So what's going on? And this is tied into this other thing where Comer, the House head of the the investigations, the Biden and Epstein and stuff, said he thinks that the Epstein files were destroyed, that's why they haven't given them out. But Kash Patel and Bondi pushed back and said, we've got lots of videos, we've got lots of stuff, but it's just not moving fast enough. And it's frustrating for all of us. But to her defense, it's not like they're not doing anything, right? They charged Letitia James. They're doing other things. They're helping with these deportations. But then she announced this, which is no small thing. Bondi announces largest fentanyl bust in our nation's history. Attorney General Pam Bondi on Tuesday touted the largest fentanyl bust in our nation's history, a coordinated takedown spanning 5 states that recovered 1.5 kilos of fentanyl, including almost about 3 million fentanyl-laced pills labeled as oxycodone, and that led to the arrest of multiple people tied to violent Mexico Sinaloa cartel. It marks the most significant victory in our nation's fight against fentanyl and drug trafficking to date. And the alleged drug trafficking operations spanned across New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and Oregon. And the multi-agency investigation began with undercover operations and surveillance 6 months ago. So it took 6 months to get here, okay? So we need to understand these things take time. In addition to the fentanyl haul, officers said they recovered 35 kilos of methamphetamines, 7.5 kilos of cocaine, 4.5 kilos of heroin, 49 rifles and pistols. That's a big bust. Okay, we're hurting these cartels. That's important. Those busts are saving our children because those drugs are never going to get into their system. So it's not like they're doing nothing, okay? So then the Democrats, I thought this story was rich. House Democrats are begging Pam Bondi not to cut the DOJ Race Relations Office. The Race Relations Office, geez, what do they do? Huh? Why do we need this? Let's see here. House Democrats are formally appealing to Attorney General Pam Bondi, urging her to maintain the Community Relations Service, a non-investigative and non-prosecutorial office established under the Department of Justice during the civil rights era. This office, often termed the Peacemaker Program, faces potential closure according to a DOJ memo issued last month. Created under the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Community Relations Service ostensibly aims to mediate and resolve racial and ethnic tensions, conflicts, and civil disturbances, fostering racial harmony and stability. Notably, the office was twice deployed to Minneapolis during the George Floyd riots, but appeared to have little impact. Okay? This is the kind of stuff that just has jobs for lefties. They don't do anything. Their budget last year, $24 million. They got to go. They got to go. And this is how we hurt the left. Okay? Because these people weren't fighting for equal justice. They were putting their thumbs on the scale for lefty causes. That's why they got to go. And so it's great to see the Dems begging for us not to do it. And then we got to do it. We have to do it. And then, again, this is another thing that I called for. This is important. Minnesota DA who refused to charge Tesla terrorists is now under investigation by the DOJ. When that DA in Minneapolis said that the scumbag, who's a government employee in Minneapolis, who works for, Tampon Tim, was, keying Teslas, 6 of them, and they let that guy go, I said, the DOJ's got to get involved. Well, they got involved, but in a different way, okay? The Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation into the Hennepin County Attorney's Office following a report that County Attorney Mary Maiorty implemented policies instructing prosecutors to consider a defendant's race when making plea decisions. The investigation comes after growing scrutiny of Maiorty's prosecutorial discretion, including her office's refusal to file felony charges against a state employee accused of causing over $20,000 in damages to multiple Teslas in Minneapolis. Again, the DOJ said This is terrorism. This coordinated assault on the Tesla company to attack Elon Musk and try to stop Doge were terrorist acts. And this DA lets them off. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Hamid Dillon, who we talked about last week, confirmed that the DOJ Civil Rights Division will examine whether minorities' office engaged in a pattern or practice of depriving persons of rights, privileges, or immunities secured or protected by the Constitution or laws of the United States. The probe follows the publication of an internal Hennepin County Attorney's Office memo that advised prosecutors to evaluate a defendant as a whole person, including considerations of their racial identity and age when deciding plea offers. While racial identity and age are not appropriate grounds for departures from Minnesota sentencing guidelines, proposed resolutions should consider the person's charged as a whole person, including their racial identity and age, the memo read. The Department of Justice has labeled this guidance as discriminatory, and Dillon's office is now reviewing whether the practice violates federal laws. Okay? You gotta go after the people, just like they arrested that judge who let the illegal immigrant go out the back door while ICE was waiting to arrest him. They're not above the law. They're the ones who tell you no one's above the law. Donald Trump's not above the law. That's why we're charging him with these bogus crimes. They don't like the fact that we're now using their phrase against them. And you should use that phrase a lot. No one's above the law. Say it loud, okay? Say it loud. So then, I'm going to close this part of the first half of the show, because here's what Trump's doing, right, on trade. Here's what Trump's doing with the military. Here's what Trump's doing, with the DOJ and all that other stuff. What's the left doing? You know what the left's doing? They're completely making fools of themselves and helping us. On Friday, Newark, New Jersey mayor was arrested for criminal trespass during a political resistance stunt at an ICE detention facility in New Jersey. You can't make this stuff up. Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ross Baraka and 3 congressional representatives, Bonnie Watson Coleman, Rob Menendez, LaMonica McIver, attempted a political stunt at a local ICE detention facility in New York. Mayor Roscoe was arrested. The intention of the group was to shut down deportation operations at Delaney Hall, a 1,000-bed detention facility used by Immigration and Customs Enforcement as part of the removal process for illegal aliens. Baraka, Coleman, Menendez, and McIver created a public disturbance as part of their stunt and trespassed on federal facilities. As an outcome, Mayor Ross Baraka was handcuffed and led away by federal authorities as the agitated crowd tried to fight the police and federal officials. The arrest followed a chaotic scene in the facility's parking lot involving protesters, federal law enforcement officers, and 3 members of Congress. The Trump administration reopened the 1,000-bed facility this month to house migrants aimed at a lawsuit from the city against a private operator alleging it does not have the proper inspection and permits, right? So these are local officials who want illegal immigrants in our country and in New Jersey trying to fight our deportation efforts, which the American people support like 65%, okay? Alina Habba, the Trump supporter who was just named to be the Attorney General or named to be the federal DA of New Jersey. The mayor of Newark, Ross Baca, committed trespass and ignored multiple warnings from Homeland Security investigations to remove himself from the ICE detention center in Newark, New Jersey this afternoon. He has willingly chosen to disregard the law. This will not stand in the state. He has been taken into custody. "Quote unquote, no one is above the law," right? So do they really think they're helping themselves, right? What are Democrats doing? They're standing with the illegals against American citizens. What did these Democrats, what did they do for the victims of the crimes? And there are stories out there that tell you who these 1,000 people are in this detention center who have raped, murdered, robbed citizens. These Dems don't give a damn about those citizens. They care about the illegals. Why? Because the replacement theory was real. It was true. The only way they were ever going to keep power and take more power in the U.S. was to bring millions of illegals in to vote in our elections for them and make this like California a one-party, make America like California a one-party dystopian state. That's why they're doing this, but it's not helping them, it's hurting them. So I'll end the podcast with this great story from James Carville, who's kind of a nut job nowadays. James Carville tells Ilhan Omar to get out of the Democratic Party. Finally, someone is saying it because all the rest are scared of the leftists. All the rest of the Democrats, quote unquote, are afraid of these crazy people. Famed Democratic strategist James Carville unleashed a blistering attack on Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota after her controversial comments about white men surfaced on social media. The outspoken former Clinton advisor didn't mince words on Wednesday's Truth Teller Summit, where he systematically demolished Omar's inflammatory rhetoric. Omar's comments, which initially came from a 2018 Al Jazeera interview during her congressional campaign, exposed the radical left's disturbing obsession with race-based attacks. In an interview, she outrageously claimed that Americans should be more fearful of white men than radical Islamic terrorists because they are actually causing most of the deaths within this country. It's crazy. The radical Congress even went so far as to suggest implementing racial profiling against white men. We should be profiling, monitoring, and creating policies to fight the radicalization of white men, she declared without a hint of irony. Well, what was the Joe Biden administration doing? What was the Merrick Garland FBI and DOJ, Christopher Wray DOJ doing? They were doing exactly that. They were profiling white men and calling us domestic terrorists. You see what I'm saying? The left controls the Democratic Party. That's what the truth is. And Carville's the one calling it out. And Carville recognized a rhetoric like this as killing the Democratic Party. He said, Ilhan Omar says that white men are responsible for most of the deaths in the United States, he said. So let me get this straight. 69% of the people, I'm struck with, are white. Of that, half are males. So roughly 33% of the voters are white males, and he wants to attack them. He said, let's go out and piss off 33% of people that vote, and that's a smart strategy. Are these people, and there are people that agree with her. There are people that actually agree with her. And I think honestly, I think those people are more trouble than they're worth, okay? Carville said later that day, during a Politicon podcast appearance, he said, lady, you don't just get out of the Democratic. Why don't you just get out of the Democratic Party? Start your own party. And he wasn't done. In fact, we don't think we ought to be running against any gender, any ethnic group, any race, any religion, or anything else, he continued. These people are just helpless. They cannot be helped. There's nothing you can do to help them. They need to just get out of our party, okay? But see, he just named, we aren't running against any gender, any ethnic group, any race, any religion, but that is the politics of personal identity. That's identity politics. That's what the Dems have been selling since Barack Obama came on the stage, since the global left, brought him in. And now Donald Trump and you and I are defeating it. DEI is dead. CRT is dead. Wokeness is dead. And the Democrat Party is dead. And James Carville just confirmed that to you. Okay? All right. We're going to take a short break, to talk a little bit about the We the People Convention and how you can benefit from our resources. And we'll be back with the second half of the podcast. You've been listening to the We the People Convention News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski.
When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. What, something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. If you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video. So people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thanks a lot.
The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org, or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. Okay, we're back for the second half of our podcast. Thank you for joining us, especially those who are new to us. I hope you enjoyed the first half of the show. When you watch that video, you can see we have lots of resources to help you share this information. In that video, which is older, it says we're not on Facebook or Twitter. We now are on Facebook, and you should be on X, particularly. If you don't have an account, just go to x.com and then search on Tom Z WTPC, Tom Z WTPC, and you'll see our account. Click the follow button, okay, and maybe even the little bell that says you can get notifications, because I post on that every day because things are breaking so fast. We are also on Facebook. I'm still leery of Facebook. I kind of just dipped my toe in the water, but you can find us at wethepeopleconvention.org or We the People Convention on Facebook if you want to start following there, if you're a big Facebook person. So we are doing those kind of things. I also, video does not talk about our new chapters player. It's not that new. We've had it for a long time. But on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org, we have not just the video of this podcast, but then there's a thing at the bottom that comes up on Sunday, because it takes them a little time to take our podcast and break it into chapters. And you can watch just the story that you didn't know anything about. You don't have to watch the whole podcast if you don't want. And we have like thousands of people using our chapters player every week. And what's great is you can watch a specific story. In other words, you click on it, it goes right to that story of the video, but then there's a link that you can copy to send to someone else via text or email or to post on social media with just that part of the story. Okay? So use our chapter players as well, because again, this is all about us being educated, knowing what is going on that affects your and my individual liberty, freedom, and prosperity, and then educating our fellow citizens. That's the whole goal here, to share the information. So please do, particularly if you're new, that's one of the things we ask you to do. We are driven by our donations, and if you can give, please do. Go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the donate link. That's really important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that we get more people to watch this and more people to take actions that we will talk about you should take. Okay, and I'll have some of those in this second half of the show. So let's move into the international area, because quite frankly, we've got some issues, okay? I've said this from the beginning. Yes, we had to elect Donald Trump to avoid our country literally being lost. And we came this close. But the fight isn't just here at home. It's an international fight. It's a fight against global communism. That's what the whole World Economic Forum is about, controlling humans across the globe with totalitarianism. That's why China was funding it. That's why they were trying to destroy the United States from outside and from within. But now we're on the ascent again, thanks to our efforts to elect Donald Trump and Donald Trump's efforts since we elected him. But it's a global fight, and there's battles being fought everywhere. So there's good news, and I want to share that with you. But let me start, first of all, with some good news about what's going on with Iran and all that stuff. Trump announced that the Houthis have surrendered after Trump's bombing barrage. And that's no small thing, because they had basically closed the Red Sea, which is one of the biggest commercial seaways on the planet, because everything that's manufactured in China, Taiwan, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Korea goes to Europe through the Red Sea into the Mediterranean and up. Okay, and the Houthis, under Iran's guidance, as part of the Hezbollah, Hamas attacks on Israel, had shut it down, and Biden did nothing. Trump doesn't do nothing. Trump did a lot. And it's worked. President Trump announced Tuesday that the Houthi rebels in Yemen have thrown in the towel and will stop attacking ships going through the Red Sea. We'll see if that's true. So far, it looks like it. The news comes after the president ordered almost 2 months of a constant bombing attack against the Houthis. We will stop the bombings, Trump told reporters during a press conference. They have capitulated. We will take their word. They will not be blowing up ships anymore. And that's the purpose of what we were doing, to try to stop them from blowing up ships. The attack on Iran-backed Houthis was quite extensive, as detailed by Strawn Stevenson. He said the U.S. Commander-in-Chief ordered a blitz of more than 100 precision airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, destroying command and control facilities, weapons manufacturing facilities, and advanced weapons storage locations. The U.S. also confirmed that airstrikes had led to the death of several Houthi leaders, without providing additional details of exactly who was killed. The crushing of the Houthis has effectively wrecked the last remnants of the mullahs' axis of resistance, and the theocratic regime is now in its weakest state since the 1979 revolution brought them to power. So that's talking about Iran has now been brought to its lowest level of strength since 1979. And that's why Trump is pushing them for a deal to stop their nuclear weapons. And that's why Iran's negotiating people are pushing Trump a economic deal to give U.S. businesses access to the Iranian markets, to try to do kind of like what Trump did in Ukraine with the minerals deal, something like that in Iran. I don't know if it's possible. All I know is actions speak louder than words. Trump has once again moved decisively to remove one of their tools. That's good for us. That's good for us. Politically, there's really good news across the globe. Okay, this was Romania. Romania, globalist PM announces plans to resign following populist Simon's first round blowout win. I had expressed to you guys that the EU bragged about the fact that when the conservatives won the first round of elections in Romania, they basically said, we're just going to disallow it. And the Romanian, some agency in Romania said, oh, that win is negated because it was Russian social media that caused them to win. Sound familiar? Sound like 2016 US election? Well, they lose again. The leftist liberal coalition government in Romania appears to be on the precipice of collapse in the wake of a strong victory of populist George Simion in the first round of the redo presidential elections on Sunday. Socialist Democrat Romanian Prime Minister Marcel Ciuclaru on Monday announced plans to resign and called on left-wing Socialist Democrats Party to withdraw from the recently formed coalition government with the globalist National Liberal Party and Socially Conservative Democratic Alliance of Hungarians. Following the cancellation of the previous presidential election in November, which saw populist Călin Gheorghiu banned after securing a surprise victory in the first round of voting over alleged Russian interference, a redo election was triggered. Gheorghiu ally and self-described MAGA candidate George Simion dominated in the first round Sunday, winning 40.1% of the vote. Bucharest Mayor Nicos Dan came in second with 21% of the vote. The governing coalition had placed all its hopes in acting President Călin Anișescu of the National Liberal Party, with the Social Democrats deciding not even to run a candidate on their own. Yet Anișescu came in third place with 20.7% of the vote, eliminating him from the second round of runoffs to be held on May 18th. However, Simion appeared to be riding a wave of anger over the move to ban Gheorghiu from standing in the race, which critics claim came at the result of pressure from Eurocrats in Brussels over his opposition to NATO expansion and the war in Ukraine. French populist presidential candidate Marine Le Pen, who is currently facing a potential ban on her own, right? Because the left can't win elections. They've got to just take them out like they tried to do with Donald Trump, commented that Romania has just offered European Commission President Mrs. von der Leyen a very nice boomerang by backing Simion after Gheorghiu's ban. Like Gheorghiu, Simion is opposed to West continuing to fund and arm Kiev and back President Donald Trump's efforts to bring about a peace settlement to end the conflict in Ukraine. Should Simion win the election this month, which he should do, he would join a growing number of President Donald Trump allies in the European Union. Last month, the Romanian politician told Breitbart News that if he and the Polish presidential candidate Karol Nawrocki are victorious in their respective elections this month, they would serve as pro-Trump presidents, pro-freedom presidents against the Brussels EU bureaucracy. That's great news, folks. That's great news. We need to break them. We need to bring freedom and liberty and people's rights back. We need to end the climate commies, right? And all the damage they've done in France and the Netherlands and Germany. And speaking of Germany, Germany reverses designation of populist party AfD as right-wing extremists following lawsuit and pressure from Trump. And I praised President Trump last week when he, made a statement about what was going on in Germany, where their Secret Service basically said, oh, all the MAGA people, quite frankly, that's who they were, are treasonous and their party should be disbanded. Well, Trump spoke out forcefully, and then they sued, the AfD sued. Following a lawsuit and criticism from Trump administration, Germany's domestic spy agency has suspended its classification of the populist Alternative for Germany, which placed second in the country's recent federal elections, as a right-wing extremist organization. Wow, doesn't that sound familiar? The German domestic spy agency has suspended its labeling after they filed lawsuit, and Trump pushed back. And now, they're basically saying that they're going to win in court, and AfD is rising. So this is, again, the Trump effect that people understand. Like I said, even the new Pope said mass immigration is a disaster. The climate hoax is a disaster. Net zero is a disaster. And we, the people, globally are rising up against that. And there was an article in Alex Jones's InfoWars that said from England to Romania, they can't stop the revolt of the people. From England to Romania, they can't stop the people's revolt. Leaders of the EU have always boasted that their project is about creating an ever closer union across Europe. Now it seems as if the European politics is indeed coming closer together, but not in a way that the centralized Brussels elites would like. Instead, from England across Germany to Romania, recent election results show that millions of European voters are now united in their determination to get rid of old pro-EU political establishment for voting for national populist parties. Last Thursday brought an extraordinary breakthrough for Nigel Farage's insurgent Reform UK in the parliamentary, local, and mayoral elections across England. Then on Sunday, the nationalist candidate George Simeon easily won the first round of the Romanian presidential elections. These results demonstrate the widening reality gap between the official Europe image by the EU elites and the real Europe where millions live, work, and vote and want freedom. The EU elites have been happily drawing the UK Labour government closer into Brussels' orbit on everything from trade to defence policies, assuring everybody that Europe is leaving the trauma of Brexit in the past. Yet last week, millions of English voters rejected Labour as well as the collapsing Tories and made clear that they see Mr. Brexit, Nigel Farage, as the future. In Romania, EU elites and their media allies did all their power to demonize Simeon as a far-right Trump ally. Yet the AUR leader's support only increased to the point where he won around 40% of the vote on Sunday. These setbacks for the Brussels oligarchs come after similar results across Europe, notably the surge of support for the right-wing alternative for Germany in February's German elections. It's now clear that the populist revolt, despite repeatedly being declared dead, is alive and kicking across Europe. Meanwhile, it is the old mainstream parties that are teetering on the edge of the political grave, desperately clinging to their survival. After Germany reunified 35 years ago, the Christian Democrat Socialist Democrat duopoly split more than 80% of the votes between them. Now they can barely muster half that number between them. In last weekend's elections in England, the Labour and Conservative parties combined to muster about a third of all the votes between them. Again, historic low. There's greater distance now between these parties and the people, especially working class and young people, than at any time in modern history. It's just real simple. The hoax is up. They only were able to do what they did by censorship, by controlling the media narrative. Okay, that's what they did. You know, when Barack Obama came along and MSNBC and CBS and ABC just said everything he said is true. You know, we're the most racist country in the world. George Floyd's death shows police, brutality. That when they said hands up, don't shoot, that it showed that cops, white cops, were hunting black people in this country. Total lies, total fabrications. We weren't the most racist country. We were the least racist country. They're the ones who made it racist against white people. And it's all been proven wrong because of you, because of your fidelity to the truth, because of this podcast and your support of this organization and all the other ones from True the Vote and Daily Wire and all the podcasts like Tucker Carlson's and Dan Bongino's and all that stuff. We would never give up on the truth, and the truth has won out. And the global climate hoax, which was nothing but a communist-funded assault on capitalism, is done. Anyone who believes anything about the world's going to end and the mankind is pollution is going to end the earth, call them out. They're a commie dupe. They're a fool. There is no evidence at all that the climate hoax is real. It's a scam. The energy scam is just what Trump calls it, the Green New Scam. But it's because you share this podcast and you share the articles on our website that people know this. That's why it's important that you watch this podcast. That's why it's important that our organization does this podcast. It's a lot of work to do this podcast. But more and more people, especially many of you who are joining us for the first time this week, are saying, yeah, I can't make sense of it. There's so much political news. I don't understand what I should pay attention to and not. You're coming to us to get some clarity and some direction. And that's happening globally. That's why I thank people who are not citizens. People watch this podcast from around the globe. And you can help with that by sharing that. Okay? And so, we're winning not just here, but globally. But understand, they are not going to give up. They must be defeated. Understand? They're not going to say, oh, we lost the election, so we'll do what Trump says. You can see they aren't doing that. And I'll give you more evidence to that here. But that's why Trump is fighting back so, and you could use the term viciously. Yeah, viciously. No mercy. And that's what we have to do, because these people will not go away. We must stop them. So I think this is great. I think Trump should do this. Oh boy, Trump administration might release Biden tapes from special counsel investigation. Yep, they should. This is the tapes when they interviewed Joe Biden about the documents in his garage, right? The classified documents at the Penn Library that he stole as a senator, that he should go to prison for. And they said, well, we're not going to charge him because he's just a feeble old man that, a jury would never convict, except you would never give a jury a chance, would you? So they didn't want to release the audio bit, even though, Comer and Jordan, those guys pressed them for it, because it would have hurt their. Now, again, this is Merrick Garland's FBI and DOJ would not release them. Why? Because they didn't work for you, the American people. They weren't federal employees who enforced the Constitution. They were lefty activists who wanted to rig the next election by not releasing it. And Donald Trump should, and I believe he will. The interview infuriated the Democrat Party and its media lights. Attorney General Merrick Garland tapped special counsel Robert Hur to investigate whether Joe Biden mishandled classified information. This comes after such sensitive materials were found unsecured in multiple locations like his garage and the Penn Center. Special counsel Hur interviewed the aging, dementia-ridden president, and he came away with a damning conclusion. While he described Joe as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, we know those tapes are probably a doozy, and Trump is considering releasing them now. The Trump administration is making plans to release the audio of former President Joe Biden's interview with Robert Hur, the special counsel who investigated Biden's handling of classified documents. The details of the plan are in flux and not clear whether President Trump and his advisors have made a final decision. Biden's camp is girding for the possible release, said two people familiar with the former president's preparation, and said a deadline of sort is approaching on May 20th. That's like just around the corner, 10 days from now. And separate Freedom for Information Act lawsuits brought by conservative groups like Judicial Watch and the Heritage Foundation and various news organizations that have said, this is our right to get this. You have to give it to us. And they haven't. Why? Because they're covering up. They're covering up the biggest scandal in American history, that a person who was cognitively impaired was illegally put in the White House as a cover to the left's destruction of our nation. We want to hear those tapes. Bring them on. I'll be playing them on this podcast, let me tell you. Okay? And then now the big thing that's going on in Washington, now that Easter's over, they got the House and the Senate have to pass the big, beautiful bill. And everybody's, they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it because the Republicans are cowards. They're just cowards. Your Republican House and Senate members are cowards. But President Trump is going to try to force them. You've got to try to force them. And they're doing all kinds of little maneuvers. And this is one you should be aware of. Analysis. Republicans sidestep Senate filibuster. The debt ceiling hike to Trump tax cuts by putting the Trump's debt ceiling in the Trump tax cut and border security bill. That's what's going on. In Washington, D.C., there are a few facts of life, and one of them is that since the inception, more than a century ago, the debt ceiling, one way or the other, will be increased. And this is a problem, folks. They keep saying, we're going to increase our line of credit. Wouldn't you love to be able to tell the bank, I'm increasing my line of credit and the bank would have nothing to say about it. That's what they're doing. They've been doing it for 100 years, okay? Often that will be done on a bipartisan basis under regular order, usually requiring 60 votes in the Senate for passage, thus requiring compromises in order to get it across the finish line. But in 2025, House and Senate Republicans have instead opted to include the debt ceiling in the budget reconciliation bill that will also extend and expand President Donald Trump's 2017 tax cuts, including new measures for border security and codifying President's executive orders. Speaking at a press conference Tuesday, House Speaker Mike Johnson outlined that the House would be putting into law some of President Trump's budget-related executive orders. We're going to codify dozens more of President Trump's budget-related executive orders, spending-related executive orders through the budget reconciliation process. And Republicans, like they did during the Trump and Bush administrations, are using budget reconciliation to get their tax cuts done. And this time it's to get some of their favorite approaches to border security and spending cuts enacted as well. Because the bottom line is, if they don't put the debt ceiling in there, which they have to do, and Treasury Secretary Bassett said you need to do this by July, okay, they're not going to get it passed. So that's what they're going to do. There's all kinds of things going on in the negotiations. This Senator Tom Tillis blocking Ed Martin's thing, I think, plays into this because Trump needs every vote he can get to do this. I will say this to you again, and this is a call to action. You guys need to call your senators and your House members and say, guys, you got to get this done. They're already playing games. The House was supposed to pass it by Memorial Day, and now they're hinting, oh, it might be 4th of July. Well, that doesn't give the Senate time. And this has to be done by the end of August, for September. That's when the new budget goes in. That's what this is. So this is a direct call to action. This week, you need to call, write, however you want to contact, see them in person if they're in their district, and tell your representatives, Republican representatives, you got to pass Trump's big, beautiful bill. If they don't, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to lose in 2026. If they don't do this, we're going to lose the House or the Senate, most likely the House, in 2026. And the Dems, the radical nut job Dems, are going to spend the last 2 years of Trump's term impeaching him and stopping everything we've done. And nothing that Trump is doing will be put into legislation so that once he's gone, the next president can't just, with a stroke of a pen, get rid of it. The stakes are immensely high. It is not too early. It's right on time for you to act. And I'm asking you to do that this week. Okay? That's how you protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay. I had this story up because it came out right as we did our podcast last week, and it's really important. DC Appeals Court finally reins in rogue judges. Now, I'm not saying that all the activities by the left using lawfare to have courts block the president, okay, has stopped. But this was an important ruling, and I'll explain why. The Trump administration secured a significant legal win on Saturday, last Saturday, the 3rd, when D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals granted a stay in several consolidated lawsuits challenging the administration's restructuring of the federal media agencies. That's like, the Voice of America, Carrie Lake's group, and all that. The decision not only paused lower courts ruling against the administration, but also laid out a clear framework for how future legal challenges should be evaluated. In its opinion, the appellate court took the opportunity to clarify judicial limits and remind district courts of the proper legal standards. The court emphasized 3 key points. First, disputes over personnel actions fall under the jurisdiction of the Merit Systems Protection Board. They're not doing that. Okay? You got to bring it up in the right venue. Second, disputes over federal grant terminations belong in the courts of federal claims, not district courts. They should say, I'm sorry, I can't hear your case. It's in the wrong court. The ACLU and those guys, they don't want to go there because they want to go to the most lefty activist judges. And then this, and this is a big one. Third, the issuing board broad injunctions without requiring plaintiffs to post a bond could result in irreparable harm to the government. That is the defense that Trump needs. If these plaintiffs want to say, you have to give this money to USAID, billions of dollars, they have to put up a bond so when they lose the case, the federal government will be reimbursed. That's the law. These lefty judges haven't been doing that. And so that's a way that Trump and the DOJ can fight back and say, no, your ruling is invalid because you didn't follow the law. All right? But it came out this week, both Sotomayor, the Democrat, and Justice Roberts made public statements against the president. Now, the president's making a lot of statements against the courts. Don't get me wrong, but it's unusual, not just for the Chief Justice, but for a sitting justice to make public comments. They didn't name Trump by name, Sotomayor didn't, but it was clear. She spoke at the D.C. Bar Association meeting and told the lawyers there to keep fighting, to stop what's going on. She's ruling on these cases. She needs to recuse herself. And then Chief Justice Roberts came back and said, impeachment's not the way to handle this stuff. The courts have a right. We are a co-equal branch, and we have a right to stop Congress and the president if they're doing something illegal. But you're not stopping them from doing things that are illegal. You're doing things that are stopping them from doing things that you don't want them to do. We are facing a constitutional crisis. And I've said to you for the last 3 weeks that this has to be resolved. We must defeat the radical courts. So Stephen Miller came out this week. I talked to you a couple weeks ago. We must suspend habeas corpus. Lincoln did it. Teddy Roosevelt did it. Franklin Roosevelt did it. We must suspend habeas corpus, which is the right to go to court for trial for illegals. They don't have the right. Habeas corpus is for American citizens. But the left is saying, oh, these 12 million people we let in without any court trial, which were required, without any kind of review, we let them in illegally, but you have to give them all a trial. 12 million of them. Bull crap. Bull crap. We don't. Trump's going to have to act. And then he's going to have to act against Roberts. He's going to have to show that the court is illegal. They're invalid. Because they're way out of their lane, folks. This is pure leftist instructionism. And Roberts is part of it. Roberts is one of them. That's a fact. But this is coming, folks, and it has to come. We cannot restore America to the rule of law when you have criminal courts. Not that they're criminal courts. The people in the courts are criminals. They are criminals. It's proven. It's not even debatable. What they did to the January 6ers was criminal. Those judges need to be charged with violating the rights of those January 6th political prisoners. That's why we're frustrated with Pam Bondi. But this is coming to a head, kids. Let me tell you, this is coming to a head. This is also coming ahead. And folks, I can honestly tell you, I personally was concerned about this literally 20 years ago when I first heard about how screwed up our air traffic control system was. Okay? Trump touts rebuilding and modernization of U.S. air traffic control, blasts Buttigieg for having no clue and doing nothing. We just had another incident at the Newark airport where the video screens just went blank. We just had another incident in Washington, D.C., where a military helicopter was taking some government military officials on a tour and almost hit commercial aircraft. It's insane. These people are insane. But I want you to share this with this another ask, because people are going to start to say, look at all this problem that Trump's having. These are Trump's faults. No. I will post this video on our podcast page for you to share, but listen to our our Secretary of Transportation. Listen to him explain to you why we're in this situation. It's outrageous.
This is not a new problem. We've known this problem has existed. There's been multiple GAO reports over the last 4 years saying you have real problems with air traffic control and you should do something with it before it actually fails. So think about this. The last administration spent $1.2 trillion. The largest infrastructure package ever known to man, they spent, Joe Biden signed right here at this White House. And how much was spent to rebuild air traffic control? $5 billion. And of the $5 billion that was spent or was given, only $1 billion was actually spent. So they have made no investments in the system that we now see having issues in Newark. On top of that, they were focused on things like racist roads. They literally spent time concerned about the word cockpit and changing cockpit to flight deck. It's not funny, that's actually what they spent time on. Or airmen to aeronaut. And so now this administration has come in, and it was shortly after the DCA air crash that I started to look at the air traffic control system. And very quickly, I saw one piece of the pie where there was issues, and then scratched further, and there's another piece of the pie. And as we looked at it, we see that the whole system needs to be redone. We need to build a brand new air traffic control system.
That's no easy task, to build a brand new air traffic control system while air traffic control is operating. Thank God for Elon Musk. Thank God for Doge. They're going to do it. We're talking about replacing every computer in every air traffic controller in the United States and bringing in new software. It should have been done. It was, they put money towards it in 1985, 1995, 2000. Nobody did anything. Your lives are at stake. You're flying. And they didn't do anything. That's how little they care about the American people. So when people are talking about, wow, did you see that other incident with this plane again? Make sure you bring this up. Make sure you message to them. Yeah, you know why we're in this situation? And you know why who's fixing it? Yeah, Donald J. Trump's fixing it because he actually cares about your safety and he's doing something, and he doesn't have a mentally ill Buttigieg who thinks that men can have babies running the Department of Transportation. Right? Make the point. It's important. This was important also because it's just Trump is trying to get us to manufacture again, and we need to have the workforce, and that's going to come from small business. And so I was really happy to see this come out. Small Business Administration, Kelly Loeffler, Made in America bill will help bring back U.S. economic independence. Now, she's saying that she thinks this will be bipartisan, because wouldn't Democrats be interested in creating small business and jobs? Well, we'll see. The Small Business Administrator Kelly Loeffler told Breitbart News that the legislation she announced with lawmakers this week would help bring back America's economic independence and supercharge the return of American industry by boosting SBA loans to small businesses. Specifically, the bill, if passed through Congress, would double the individual loan limit for the 7A and 504 small manufacturing loans from $5 million to $10 million. Loeffler sees the legislation as something everyone can get behind, regardless of political affiliation. I was really excited to be able, in the first 100 days, to be able to work on a piece of bipartisan legislation. And I think there's nothing more bipartisan than small business. They power our local communities and innovation, and they need our support. So will the Democrats vote for this? They should. Again, you gotta incentivize this manufacturing. You can't just say, okay, let's do it. You gotta do something about it. Okay. So again, Trump is thinking ahead, not just acting in the moment, but laying the groundwork for things to succeed. Okay. It's really important. This was another important thing that we've been all saying. The whole COVID thing literally was insane. What was insane about it? Oh, we're going to weaponize viruses that currently humans can't get. We're going to create these deadly viruses so that in case one of our military adversaries does it, we can have a vaccine to stop it. No. You talk about crazy? You talk about madmen? Fauci and his people? That's insane. So what did President Trump just do? President Trump just bars federal funding of dangerous gain-of-function research in countries with poor oversights. And here, not just in other countries, President Trump has signed an executive order barring current and future federal funding of gain-of-function research in countries like China and Iran. Additionally, funding is barred from going to any foreign nation that is considered to have insufficient research oversight. The measures will drastically reduce the potential for lab-related incidents involving gain-of-function research, like that conducted on bat coronaviruses in China by the EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the Trump White House said in a post on X. According to Trump and the Trump White House, the presidential order also directs American research agencies to identify other forms of biological research that could pose a threat to American public health, public safety, or national security. Consequently, the order says that federal funding will be halted for those projects as well. And another provision, the executive order prohibits U.S. government funding from contributing to foreign research likely to cause another pandemic. Lastly, the measure signed by President Trump on May 5th increases domestic security and safety measures in order to prevent lab accidents and other biosecurity incidents, such as those that are likely to cause COVID-19 and the 1977 Russian flu. RFK Jr., I think it was Jay Bhattacharya this week, said that they had closed down some lab in Maryland that had some sort of a leak that they weren't aware of until just now for this very reason. This is sanity returning. This is common sense. And we owe this all to Donald J. Trump, okay? On the illegal immigration front, this is a big story this week. Trump offers illegals $1,000 and a plane ticket to self-deport. And I put out a tweet on that, or a text message on that, and you guys responded because, we're kind of like, wait a minute, these people broke into our country illegally, and now we're going to pay them to leave? Well, again, why? Because it's pragmatic. Because Trump knows, that this is a cheaper way to get rid of them. Illegal immigrants who self-deport will receive $1,000 stipend under a plan that Trump administration says will protect law enforcement and save American tax dollars. Along with the illegal immigrants getting a $1,000 stipend, Fox News reported that the Trump administration would also pay for the cost of airfare. The total cost for the stipend and airfare could be around $4,500 on average, which makes me question what the hell kind of airplane are they getting on? A significant reduction from the estimated $17,000 it costs the federal government to detain and deport an illegal immigrant, according to DHS, which added that the illegal immigrants would not receive the stipend until they were verified that they had left the United States. If you are here illegally, self-deportation is the best, safest, and most costly effective way to leave the United States to avoid arrest. DHS is now offering illegal aliens financial travel assistance and a stipend to leave. So then Trump announced that on the app that the illegal immigrants got so Biden could fly them in, on the app, they can now book their flight out on the app. So I think this is smart. Trump is trying to say the courts are trying to stop us. Let's incentivize what we want. There will be people who take advantage of this. In the meantime, that's the carrot. The stick is, remember, Trump said he's going to fine illegals who don't leave for every day they don't leave based on this law that's on the books, so that he could take their house, can take any property they've got, their car, whatever. Well, if they leave voluntarily, they can protect it. They can sell the car. They can give it to some relative or something. So carrot, stick, carrot, stick. We're not messing around. We're not waiting around. We're acting. We're acting, okay? Speaking also of acting, this is serious stuff. We've talked week after week about the energy crisis, the fact that AI is going to raise the need for energy in the United States to like double what we're producing. And we talked about how the states, and I asked you to call your state House and Senate people and your state office holders and say, what are we doing to generate more electricity in this state? How can we open this coal plant again? We talked about nuclear plants coming online. But you know what the biggest problem is? The biggest problem is our electric grid. It's ancient and it's really hurting. And we saw what happened in Spain and Portugal. Their grid failed. The whole country was without electricity. We can't let that happen here. So who's doing anything about it? I thought this was great news. And you didn't hear it. Did Fox News cover this? Yeah, they did. But, you know, have you heard it anywhere else? Power generating company to invest $11 billion to strengthen U.S. electricity infrastructure. The transmission line will be the longest in the U.S., spanning 800 miles and 4 states. Investor in Invenergy, INVN Energy, Invenergy said Wednesday it has awarded a combined $1.7 billion, part of a total $11 billion to a pair of companies as part of a project to construct its Grain Belt Express electronic transmission line. The contract awards went to infrastructure company Quanta Services and construction company Kiewit Energy Group, according to Invenergy. CEO Mike Polisky told Mornings with Maria, host Maria Bartiromo, that the Grain Belt Express will be a highway system for electrons for electricity to move from where it's produced to where it's needed to power AI, data centers, industries, much needed electricity in this country to really unleash America's energy, domestic energy, to be able to power our businesses, particularly with manufacturing and AI emphasis here now in the United States. The Grain Belt Express transmission line, meant to provide 5,000 megawatts of additional energy delivery capacity, will go through Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. In total, it will be 800 miles long. In the first phase, the Grain Belt Express construction is anticipated to start next year. It will focus on portions connecting Kansas and Missouri. He expects to source materials locally in Kansas City and Missouri. He expects to source raw materials locally in Kansas and Missouri. Again, not importing them from foreign countries. On his appearance with Mornings with Maria, he said to build the entire 800-mile transmission line will take 36 months, 3 total years, but it will be in operation sometimes in 2029, which is when the AI people say we're going to need it. Let me see what else. It will cost $11 billion and create 22,000 jobs along the way between transmission and generation. I would say it's the largest electricity infrastructure project right now in the United States. She said, why are you doing this now? He said, I think clearly what President Trump said in his executive order is basically we are in an energy emergency, electricity emergency. Pulaski told her, we need electricity and we need electricity now. So what we're trying to do, and we need domestic sources, we need to reduce costs and we need energy independence. So this line or this project exactly fulfills Trump's ambitions. Okay? This is Donald Trump moving people. You think that guy would have done that during Joe Biden with the Green New Deal, Green New scam? No, he wouldn't. This is what we need. Americans making America great again, creating jobs, creating energy to create even more jobs. That's big news, folks. Share that story through our webpage. I posted this video that was sent to me by my friend Glenn Newman from Marietta and West Virginia there by Marietta. It's a very interesting video, and it's on our video section at wethepeopleconvention.org. It's called Moving Beyond the COVID-19 Lies. And in this video, this Dr. Brian Ardis, who I really wasn't that familiar with, he has this book out. He talks about the sources of COVID and the sources of what's causing long COVID, and he talks about things that can fix it. And this guy was very credible. And it's not a long video. If you go to wethepeopleconvention.org, go to the video section, you'll see this listed as the first video now. And it's like 29 minutes. It's a talk show interview. The guy is very articulate, and there's a link to buy the book. I've ordered the book to read. But he talks about, for instance, that nicotine can help block long COVID. I never heard that. Now, since then, some people said, oh, yeah, I heard that, and I'm actually doing it. But I was really interested in that. And he talked about how only like 10 or 11% of Americans still smoke, but only 1.8% of COVID deaths were from smokers because the nicotine actually help them. And he explains how that is. I think it's a video worth watching. I hope you will share that. Okay, I hope you will share that. And now I'm going to close the podcast by talking about what happened in Ohio, where we just endorsed Vivek Ramaswamy and our current Senator John Husted we endorsed them to be the Republican nominees, for the re-election in the 2026 election. Okay, and so there's this video that I put out to everyone that were on the state central committee, asking them to do this, making the case for them to do this because it was a problem. What was the problem? The problem was that we as patriots don't believe in endorsing in primaries. That's how they rig them. They've been rigging them our whole lives. You and I have rarely had a chance to vote in a primary where everybody running had an equal chance. It's always the thumb on the scale, and in Ohio, it's not a thumb. It's a cinder block that's on the scale. They have rigged every Ohio primary ever, and they were going to do it again. Many of you know nationally that President Trump, endorsed Vivek Ramaswamy for governor of Ohio after he dropped out of helping Musk with DOJ. And there was some controversy about that. Was he at odds with Musk? And they're not. They're good friends. He wants to be governor of Ohio. Our governor, current governor, Mike DeWine, took John Husted, who was his lieutenant governor, to Mar-a-Lago in January to get President Trump to endorse him to be the next governor. President Trump said, I'm not doing that. I'm endorsing Vivek Ramaswamy. And that's how Mike DeWine decided he had to appoint John Husted as our U.S. Senator, because John Husted wasn't going to be the next governor. So then what happens? Well, Mike DeWine and John Kasich and the Republican, I call them the Columbus cartel, don't want Vivek Ramaswamy. You think they want to doge Ohio? You think they want someone like Vivek to come into Ohio and expose all the things like you're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. from Doge? Hell no. They've been stealing us blind for 50 or 100 years, okay? They make all their money by controlling the governor's office. That's where they make their money. And so they had to have a plan. They had to have a plan. What was the plan? The plan was that Mike DeWine, after he made John Husted the senator, had a vacancy for lieutenant governor. And to my total surprise, they made a brilliant move. He recruited former Ohio State football coach Jim Tressel to be his lieutenant governor. And I'm like, what is that about? Why would they do that? And then I realized what they're going to do is they're going to ignore President Trump. They don't want Vivek Ramaswamy. So they're going to put Jim Tressel, who has no interest in politics, no experience in politics, they're going to convince him to put his name on the ballot in the primary for governor, because Ohio has open primaries, which means that anyone can vote in the Republican or Democratic primary anytime they want. The problem is Republicans never vote in the Democratic primary, but Democrats always vote in the Republican primary to elect the most Democrat-like Republican to hedge their bets. And that's how DeWine got elected. That's how John Kasich got elected, by Democrats. So what were they going to do? Next year in the primary, they were going to put football coach, former Ohio State football coach, very popular former football coach, Jim Tressel, up for governor, so that hundreds of thousands of Democrat Ohio State football fans would come into the Republican Party primary and vote for Jim Tressel to stop President Trump and Vivek Ramaswamy. That's what we're going to do. And so I explained that to the Central Committee and said, you need to endorse Vivek Ramaswamy right now to stop that, to help stop that. You're not going to stop it. They're still going to do it, but to make it harder. And Governor Mike DeWine was on the phone, and all his little operatives were calling these 66 state Central Committee members and saying, oh no, it's too early. And by the way, you're against endorsing. You shouldn't endorse. It's a year away. The primary is a year away. It's just too early. Others may come into the race. But I put this video out and I said, yeah, don't doubt it. Others are going to come into the race. And the name is Jim Tressel. And here's the plan. And so what did the rhinos and the Columbus cartel do? The night before the election, there was a story planted on NBC News' website by a known political operative named Gomez, who worked for the Cleveland Plain Steeler, the leftist rag in Cleveland. It was planted, and it says, oh, Jim Tressel, who previously said he's not interested in running for governor, may be reconsidering, which made me look like Nostradamus, because I had put out a video saying they're going to run Tressel to steal the election, and then they planted a story saying, don't endorse because Tressel's probably going to do that. Bad move. They did it because they were desperate, because they knew they were losing. And it sealed the deal. I think we would have won without that ad, because we had made the case that even though in principle we're against endorsing in elections, the reality was that's just an ideological dream until we change the party and close the elections. And so Vivek Ramaswamy was confirmed 60-3 out of 66 people on the Central Committee, 60 voted to endorse him. It was a huge win for the grassroots movement in Ohio. It took a huge amount of our resources, this organization's resources, my time and effort to fight that fight. But I thank God for this victory. It is without doubt the biggest victory in the 15-year history of the Ohio grassroots Tea Party liberty movement over the cabal, the criminals in Columbus. And I'm thankful to God, and I'm thankful to the members of the State Central Committee who were willing to listen, were willing to think, who stood against powerful forces that could help them and hurt them to do what's right. And particularly Chairman Alex Telefilo, who stood against the governor. The chairman of the Republican Party was under intense pressure not to let this happen. And still they did it. It was a great day for Ohio. And I think it'll be a great day for our nation. Don't get me wrong. They're still going to try to steal the primary next year. Don't get me wrong. We have a lot to do to help President Trump make America great again. We've got to make Ohio great again, because a lot of that manufacturing and a lot of that electricity generation has got to come from here. We got a hell of a fight on our hands, but this was a very big win to help us win that fight a year from now. So I want to share that with you. For everyone from Ohio, that's kind of the backstory. From everyone nationally, it gives you an insight into the kind of challenges we have to take on and we face in this organization on a daily basis. And that's why your donations are so critical to give us the ability to wage these fights and to win. Okay? We did this week. Thank God for that. So again, I'm going to close the podcast, tell others about this, get people to talk to their House and Senate members about passing the budget, tell people about that video that I just showed you about COVID-19. Watch that. Okay, those are the asks for this week. If I'm wrong about something, if I missed something, if you have a story we should cover that we didn't cover, write to me at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. We read your emails. We put your stories on if they are worthy of being on this podcast. For you guys who are new, I hope you learned things in this podcast you didn't hear anywhere else. I know that's true, but they're important because they affect your and my individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. Okay? Most of all, tomorrow, Sunday, May 11th, celebrate Mother's Day. Honor your mothers. Honor your grandmothers, your great-grandmothers. Husbands, honor your wives. They deserve all the credit for the unbelievable effort it takes to bring a child. And I just told you, we just had a new grandchild last week. Last week I told you that. I'm in awe of what our daughter and our son-in-law have to do to bring that child into this world and now to raise them. It's no simple thing. It's a hell of a responsibility. And we celebrate the women in our lives who meet that responsibility and exceed it, who go way beyond. They don't just have children. They don't just have children and raise children. They have children and they raise children and they create greatness. They raise great Americans. Thank you, ladies. Thank you to every one of you. Happy Mother's Day. We love you all. God willing, we'll both be back next week for the next edition of the We the People Convention News and Opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you, and he's already blessed America. See you next week. Bye now.
Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight